Welcome everybody to another episode of In Pursuit of Peace. Today I have with me John Gallant. Am I saying your name right, John?
Yes.
Perfect. From the Kingsley, Ontario Peace Council. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here today.
It's always a good start to kind of explain to everybody how we conduct these interviews with all the peace councils on our Pursuit for Peace and Pursuit for an international tour for the peace councils. Is that I don't really know John. I just briefly met John, but these conversations are happening live, and hopefully it is an example of how conversations can happen between human beings, because it seems that these are things that are becoming more and more important, yet more and more rare to speak about serious things in our lives. We come from different backgrounds, we come from different childhoods, yet we are here. We arrived at this podcast today to discuss peace and a lot of different things. John, can you please just begin with just explaining, just sharing a little bit of information about you and what led you towards, you started the Kingsley Peace Council, correct?
Yeah. So Kingston Peace Council was started in 2019. We are a local chapter of the Canadian Peace Congress. I understand that you've had Ed Lehman and Larry Watson, the president and the president of the Regina Peace Council as well. So we've been active in Kingston since then. I've been involved with some other organizing activities locally, namely the Cataraqui Union of Tenants, which is more concerned with our unhoused community, as well as the deplorable state of housing in Kingston, as well as we had a chapter of the Communist Party of Canada for a little while. In a few different respects, but it's been definitely interesting getting something like that off the ground here. The founding, the first meeting that we had with our old president on Zoom of the Peace Congress said, guys, it's a bit like going to Alberta and protesting oil, doing something like this in Kingston. So, best of luck to you. And, we've been at it ever since.
That's amazing. Good for you, my man. How big is Kingston? Kingston. I pronounced that wrong. I said Kingsley at the beginning. It's Kingston. My bad.
Yeah, that's okay. It's I would say it's between Toronto and one of those more peripheral Ontario cities. I would say it's growing pretty quickly. In terms of urbanizing and gentrifying and everything, they're trying to kind of make things a bit denser here and really increase the population. It's a lot of students, so they come and go a little bit, which has actually affected our ability to organize as well. But yeah.
So obviously you were looking for something, and you decided that in the lack of a peace council in Kingston, you decided to create the opportunity that you're looking for. Can you please just tell us a little bit about some of the human experience behind what you were looking for and what drove you to particularly open a peace council, right, as a part of the Canadian Peace Congress?
Certainly, yeah. Well, I can't take all of the credit. Just before we got started here, there was a group called Peace Quest. So that was comprised of a lot of older folks and older generations of peace activists here, but they had a kind of an end date to what it was that they were doing. So I believe it was the anniversary of Remembrance Day. They got up to that point and said, okay, we're no more. So I actually reached out to them to learn a bit more about their experiences and see how we could carry the torch, so to speak. But the imperative, certainly, I think you'll hear some people say things like the personal is political. But in this case, it just, on a personal, I just got really kind of upset and angry at some of the stuff that we were seeing, where the world is going, the climate is going, and so on and so forth. And you kind of go, okay, well, I have to do something. I can't do absolutely nothing at all here. And I had a good friend at the time, Doug Yearwood, who actually reached out and said, I think we should do this in Kingston. And it got off the ground after that. I think you and I had spoken before about kind of human sovereignty and human experiences and things. And I think that's been a way to communicate a lot of these things and certainly the urgency of it to people in Kingston. I think if you can approach them on their terms, we use the phrase, we're meeting people where they're at. And I think that's a way where you can, really emphasize the human aspect of it.
Yeah, and I find that the human aspect of it, especially Canada, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a newcomer still to Canada. I've been in Canada for 25 years. I mean, most of my life I've lived in Canada now, out of my 43 years. But still, I would consider myself a newcomer to Canada. And my observation is, Canada has its history before I come and before my observation. And I learned that history, and it's a very complex history, and it is a history of a colony per se, but there is a pursuit for self-determination and Canadian sovereignty. My observation is that found a home, under the premise of human rights and international law. I found that those things were a big part of the Canadian society, and in a way that I felt welcome, and in a way that I felt I'm a part of something bigger than me, and something important, and something wonderful. And so, do you still see Canada going in that direction in terms of the Canadian legacy for per se peace, for per se human rights, humanity, or was that a part of why you decided it is time to make a stance yourself?
Yeah. Well, it's no, I don't think it is. And I wrote some notes about this, and I'm going to sound a bit like some of the other people you've had so far. But at least to me, when you say human sovereignty, something that comes to mind for me is the right to choose. And certainly, the role of artists and things like that is to sort of mirror these things back to people that are not artists and everything. But certainly as a peace activist, human sovereignty to me is the right to choose. Now, our prime minister right now is an investment banker, or he was an investment banker. And as such, I think that the way that he is governing Canada is very much along those lines. Recently, there was a commitment to raise the Canada's spending commitment to NATO from 2% of our GDP to 5% of it. And that's up in the billions of dollars. Now, we are in a pretty severe housing crisis, and our tax dollars are still being used to fund forever wars, and will continue to do so. If I had to guess, I'd say they're gearing us up for our next war with China. Right now, our tax dollars are going towards things related to Ukraine, as well as the genocide that's being visited upon Palestinians, both of which the U.S. is engaging in a proxy war with its great enemies. However, Canada is really working hand in hand with that. Mark Carney will still say, elbows us with that Mike Myers thing on Saturday Night Live and so on. But the fact of the matter is that I think that's lip service, and I think it's eroding our ability to choose and live a more equitable and really safe life. So, I would like to have a future that my children will live to see, where we're not choking on black smoke and we can't afford to live somewhere because we're paying for another country to be bombed into the ground. So, I've had quite enough of that.
Well, congratulations on yourself, my friend. A quick, a few things to talk about there. When we talk about the right to choose, and self determination is essentially what we're talking about. Self determination at a human level, the way I see it, is the way I understand it, is to really truly look at the self-determination term from multiple perspectives. I really always tie geometry and knowledge of geometry to my method of music, but also to how I view life. And so self-sovereignty and the right to choose begins on a spiritual manner. I could be a slave in the worst conditions, but somehow life has sparked something in me, and my ability to think beyond the construct rises, and I discover my right to choose within myself, and I can observe and take stances within myself silently under oppression. And so really self-determination begins there, and then goes up a notch to say that, well, the environment matters and the variables that are surround me matters. And I had enough with what kind of systematic approach the surrounding has on me. And then I seek to not just make the choices externally in one way or another, where is possible, but also to find others who also believe in the same, essence, at least, because it is an essence at this point, right? The right to self-determination is like, I want to be able to write my own story. I'm a living being. I'm a human being. And then goes into the country, right? And so it seems that when it comes to Canada, there was a discrepancy where, has Canada ever had its sovereignty? What kind of a democratic country Canada truly is? Who is making some of the highest choices, like going or supporting overseas wars with tax money to pay to per se? And I mean, that should be the right of any citizen of any nation to question these things in the most respectful of ways, at least. How does that relate to our sovereignty as Canadian people? Because the sovereignty of Canada per se, is that the sovereignty of the colony under the supervision of empire, or is it the sovereignty of the people that make up Canada too? Mm-hmm. So there's all these different layers to choice, but I just want to allude, the choice, essentially the right to choose, comes from life itself in our makeup as a human being, and I think that's maybe a part of like the flame of resistance within all of us, to say that, no, we're going to question, and we're going to figure out how can we actually live in a sovereign country where we choose as people where to go, because there was no referendum to go to war or to support this war, to support that war, and at the end of the day, at best, war is a gamble, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I would say so. Yep. A gamble for weapons manufacturers and so on and so forth, and they're gambling with people's lives. I wanted to talk about the self determination thing. I think I'll be different from the previous guest that you had, in that I'm significantly younger, but part of this process was related to self-determination and wanting to do, peace work and so on and so forth. I've kind of done school and out in the working world and everything, and had a fair bit of trauma when I was younger, and this is the first time in my life where I can actually self-actualize and go, no, I want to do this because I enjoy it. And some of that is peace stuff. It's I think fulfilling, albeit exhausting at times. I also have been a little bit more involved in spirituality and kind of feeling things out a little bit more, and there's a certain amount of freedom in that, because we have every right to do that. And people will go, well, I didn't really think that about you, John. And I go, well, I don't really care. Like, I just like it. That's all it is.
That's right. That is right, my man. And that is something that we must really recognize, because look at what's happening in Syria today, right? We have religion in the Middle East is our history, my man. And so it cannot only be looked at as an ideology. But when it gets exported, it turns into an ideology because it slowly loses its roots to the history of the land where it emerged from, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea of the right to choose is embedded within the religion essence and the religion knowledge in a way that is, let's say, the older you go in history, the message is more ambiguous. So if we want to consider, let's say, the Abrahamic religion, Judaism will be a little bit more ambiguous than Quran. Quran would be more straight to the point, right? In a way that the modern human being can probably relate to a little bit closer than relating to the whole. But we can still appreciate what Judaism was and the essence of Judaism, and we can still recognize where these things meet, But the right to choose is at the heart of it, because this is why Judaism exists, is because the people wanted the right to choose, Christians too, but to the point where the oppression was not only an occupation in the land at the time of Jesus Christ, but it was also an oppression of the human being, and quite frankly, an exploitation on a spiritual level. So people were, died spiritually in that time because of major political conflict and similar times to what we live today. It's like major powers from East and West kind of competing, and that portion of the world is right in the center of that. And so the message had a little bit of a spiritual intonation to it. Islam is a different deal as well, and a little bit more in the, I don't know if I want to say political rather than organizational, right? And so it has that, and then it certainly has that within its 1,400 years of history, which is quite impressive if you're trying to establish any project of any kind, But with its bad history and dirty history and a lot of betrayals and but the philosophy is the philosophy, and at the core is the right to choose, man. at the core is like, here's knowledge, you choose what you want to choose. And I don't know where people lose sight of that, because if we look at Syria today, we have, only thing that is showcased worse than Jewish supremacy per se in Israel is Islamic supremacy in Syria. It's horrific, and at a small case, like, yeah, that is the flame of resistance. I have the right to choose. I'm a human being.
Very much so.
Can you give me your perspective on?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so it's I had kind of a cool experience related to this topic a little while ago. I talked to my therapist a bit about kind of things that she thinks I should read or so on and so forth. And she pushed me in I indicated some interest in going in the direction of occult literature, but specifically it's like a Western interpretation of Eastern religions or anything, and sometimes it can come off as nonsensical. However, in a lot of activist circles, the Communist Party and the Peace Council and so on and so forth, they're on a philosophical level. Some of them will actually argue against the necessity for this kind of thing, because they call themselves materialists, and they go, well, it's not, you can't carry it in the bucket kind of thing, therefore we should disregard it. And so I actually emailed this guy, Mitchell Horowitz, his name is. He's an occult historian out of New York, and he was, I want to say, the vice president of Random House Publishing as well. So he has, a fair bit of credit. But I sent him an email, and I said, listen, I've struggled with this for a while. There's some hostility in these circles. In your experience, how have you come to understand this? And am I off base here, kind of thing? And he sent me an email, I would say 4 hours later, and said that, no, you're not off base at all. And actually it's kind of reductive to shut this stuff out and say, it's not helpful or anything, because there's a lot of, you get your experience from everywhere. Why would you limit it to one thing? There's examples of Marcus Garvey, who is a big Pan-Africanist in the U.S., was able to kind of have this qualitative, more spiritual aspect, as well as the more concrete, Pan-Africanism and so on and so forth. So there is a precedent for it, and I'm really interested to see if I can integrate this in a way that's digestible to the average person, because certainly I find it to be very enriching.
Yeah, the spiritual element, if we want to talk about spirit, is immaterial. The way I understand it is like it's the essence of the energy of life within, because I'm a piece of life. Hello. Right. So, but what is alive versus what are my thoughts versus, whatever delusions I tell myself to be. That's where they say the famous, you are not what you think you are. I mean, the minute you put yourself in a thought, well, is that the living thing? Right. And that goes the same about spirituality. And that's why the objective, which is the essence of life, is described subjectively from so many different aspects of planet Earth, and anybody that takes this pursuit, you're going to find similarities of what they're trying to point to. Because when we per se live under oppression, we're talking about our ability to choose, or our right to choose, when all of that comes from energy, right? It's a source of energy to say, I choose, right? It's a mixture between intention and willpower. And it starts at willpower, and then another form of energy would be now to take action, right? And different resolutions. So in the death of the spiritual essence, or at least in the blindness of ignorance of its existence and what it represents, we arrive to a place where we give up. We don't have the energy, we don't have the willpower, we don't have the intentions no more. We have become something as a pure result of our surrounding or exterior variables, and that's a sad reality. So in an essence, it's not described as, it's a fun journey, spirituality, but rather it's a necessity to combat slavery, at a very, very core level of human existence. So that's how I see its necessity, because for me personally, in my journey, without the spiritual enrichment that I have, I don't know if I was able to even come close to where I am today, not even close, man. Mm-hmm. So that's how I kind of look at it. And also in the pursuit of conquering fear, because it's always fear that is the obstacle. in that pursuit, there is a level of fear that was so deep embedded inside, where the horrors that we see in the wars, and that began for me in Syria, the first war, because which they called civil war falsely. We can discuss that. But seeing horrific scenes, man, like to the point where it's not me, the individual, that is afraid, but the organism. It's not even. There's no thought process. It's just the organism at a core level is shocked and is afraid and can sense death and all that stuff. That kind of fear I would never have been able to conquer without spiritual knowledge of. You're correct. I think everybody should be looking at a universality of what we're talking about, because God is supposedly greater than all, right? Yeah. So that's like how I see these two things relate.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I took this down. It's almost like a totem thing. It's my this is my Karl Marx piggy bank, and then I use this to meditate, and I will count the beads and everything on it. It's an important reminder of the relationship.
Yeah, my man, for sure. And it's like an interesting power, what they call also like there's mantras and there's prayers, and these are all like different aspects of the discovery of the conversation with life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we want to take it from here? I'm interested maybe in tackling some of the fears that I have received. I had a clip from Larry, the president of the Canadian Peace Congress, and I posted it from our interview, and it's about NATO, and at best, I think these things are so important simply to raise the discussion. Why shall we be ignorant people? That is beyond me, because I feel like in Canada there's a certain sentiment that everybody needs to shut up and just be what you're told to be, and I feel like that is related to maybe feudalism and whatever hierarchical history of definitions of sovereignty that Canada had. But some of the fears are, are you crazy? How can we give up funding for NATO at a time where fascism is rising in the United States? Another one is, are you crazy? How can we give up the support of NATO when we know for sure that the Americans are coming to attack us? The Americans, man, like the comments were not like, we need NATO because of the Russians. It was more like the Americans, So it's like, what kind of alliance did we even have in this country between, two countries that are bordered to each other, right? It's baffling. But these are kind of some of the fears that people were posing. And my answer was, well, regardless, because the unknown is the unknown, it's kind of nice and sweet that we're even discussing this, right? We must discuss this and allow maybe science to figure it out. So what do you answer to those in relation to Canada's increasing the funding for war?
Well, I think the other person doesn't know a whole awful lot about NATO, but something that I found quite striking about it that I will bring up until I'm blue in the face is that NATO was actually designed to fight communism, and specifically the Soviet Union. I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something like keep the Cubans out and the Russians down. Yves Engler, a Canadian journalist, has written some pretty good stuff about it. But not only that, founding membership of NATO, we're actually members of the Nazi Party that were, I think, brought to the U.S. I'm not quite sure though. But they were unambiguously Nazi. So fascism is in the founding DNA of NATO, and for that reason, I don't think Dr. Strangelove, the Stanley Kubrick movie, had this thing that they repeated towards the end where it was like fear of a nuclear war, and they said we need extreme vigilance. So you're not actually acting on anything. You just need intense vigilance and looking and security and everything. And I think the language of security, I'm saying this as a political science student, but the language of security has a way of overriding every other human need. I think sometimes in society and certainly in academic writing and everything, that suddenly everything starts to be framed through this lens. And unfortunately, there's a lot of really terrible things that have happened as a result of that. I think that there are tangible ways that we could be, fixing our relationship with the U.S. I think, we could cancel joint operations or even just antagonize the relationship a little bit more, because they're not this whole, I don't know. We're getting mixed messages because the official narrative, certainly for the Liberal Party, is we're standing up to the U.S. and everything. But what they're actually doing on a policy level is not really that. There is some tariffs and things, but that's about it. So I don't really think that NATO is going to be the one that's saving us from the U.S. Not only that, U.S. is a part of NATO. I don't know. It doesn't. The devil's in the details, so to speak. With that.
They're not getting that NATO has furthered the interest of empire, you know. So
yes.
when did NATO become a I don't want to use a crusader army because that's not even a great thing, you know what I'm saying? But like like an army for truth and justice, you know. We already know that NATO has been the tool to further the interest of empire. But it's interesting to me, this thing between Canada and the United States. I mean, if we're looking at like two countries, when we're talking human rights and international law, that was from the view of many nations around the world. That is the legacy of the Western dominant world, you know? And so you would assume that that is what governs the nations in the United States and Canada. I mean, I lived in Kuwait, and when the American army came, we just looked at them as human beings, and they were great people, the people, right? Regardless of what, like the army people, it's just quite upstanding people to know. Somebody who's willing to die, man, for what he thinks is correct reasons, right? But you know, like what changed there? Canadians, Americans. I mean, from what I see, the Americans are enslaved to decision making of a certain ruling class that is not taking into consideration anything without America. You know, so I feel like the work needs to happen more on like, we need to bring more Americans into this conversation and just kind of shatter those shackles of division. And I mean, America's speaking on behalf of who exactly? Americans? I don't think so, man. You know?
Yeah. It's I think we need to be comfortable with a little bit more conflict, I think, in that regard. I did a screening of a A24 film recently. That was about just in Kingston. That was about a Navy SEAL platoon that was in Ramadi, Iraq, and they got pinned down and everything. And it was just kind of an in the moment kind of thing, not a lot of pontificating. And then I afterwards, the people in the audience were like, "What was the point of that?" Like, yeah, exactly. What was the point? There wasn't really one from that. It was a pretty cool movie, but I think still pretty sophisticated. Piece of propaganda. I'm losing my train of thought here. I had something, but well, I have two quotes that actually I wrote down after you and I spoke on the phone. That the first one is Che Guevara, and the second one is James Baldwin. But I think they remind me of a lot of the stuff you've said thus far. The first of which is at the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that a true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. And that was Che Guevara. And the second one is from James Baldwin. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. And I think that is essential to this. And we're doing Hiroshima Day in a few weeks, and we have white poppies. It's kind of an answer to the red British imperialism kind of blood imagery of the red poppy, and we're looking to kind of get our finger on the pulse on that day and really kind of talk about some of these things. I remember what I had now. So with NATO, and some of this was said by academics in political science and stuff, certainly locally for me, is that NATO is a collective defense organization, I believe it is, or they'll say collective security, one of the two. But it's an organization that requires enemies to function. And if you don't have those enemies, then it will start to create them one way or another. And the thing I said at the movie screening was, you run into an asshole in the morning, they're the asshole. You run into assholes for the rest of the day, you're probably the asshole. And in the case of international security, if you run into an enemy of freedom in the morning, probably an enemy of freedom. But if you run into enemies of freedom for the rest of the day, then maybe you're the enemy of freedom a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, and the dangerous area with that is that NATO is, by this philosophy of continuation of war, is really rooted in their sentiment of empirical dominance, which seems to be a choice of all the parties, or all the member states, because they essentially is who run NATO, and it's creating the conditions where it is needed.
Yeah.
It's destabilizing the world to force people to swallow this pill, because people don't understand in Canada that the responsibility of Canada is the Canadian people. When we swear on a constitution and all of that, when Canada is involved in terrible actions, it is the responsibility of the people. And without some sort of accountability in our country, so we can call this a country, right? That responsibility will fall on ourselves. When we're going to war against others, to other nations, it is Canadians who attacked us. So it's very important for us to raise that question of ruling class and quite frankly, a form of enslavement at this point, because you're taking people to war, which means that somebody has to go and die in these wars for you, right? We have to shed light on that, because they are effectively creating these conditions. And like you said, war with China seems to be the goal of the investments, which they're forcing us all to make. I mean, I'm running a company, and I can't force anybody to run a donation, yet an investment in here, right? Usually investors would be like, speaking from a capitalist perspective, I want to look after the interests of the capital, right? But we're kind of the same thing. That's, I think, at a bare minimum, without taking a stance to say no to NATO, at a bare minimum, hey, I need this investment justified. And if it's not justified, I need those who made it accountable, just like a company would.
Yeah. It's I just, the line of the Canadian Peace Congress is, these are public funds. They could be used for other things. And there's been people have done economic analyses of these things. I ran it through, I want to say it was ChatGPT. No, I think I used DeepSeek, the Chinese version. But I put this information in and said, what can we do with this? And it's, several 100,000 homes, improving public infrastructure, all these other things. It is, there is a real use for that. I work for a major financial institution, and if you're going to have an investment that big, at the very least, there should be some kind of return on it. But I don't think there will be a return. I think it will be paid for in blood over a long enough period of time. And, obviously we can't have that. They're pushing for a build-up in Europe, Western Europe. It's called Rearm Europe is the name of the plan. And it's like something like several $1 trillion over the next 5 years or something like that. And, I can't really see a way that makes a lot of sense right now. Because it's only ever been China, Russia, and Iran, and to a lesser extent North Korea are the enemies kind of thing. So they find a country to be the intermediary that they do the war through, and then go from there. And I actually thought we were going to go to war with Iran in the last few weeks or so. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But even on a spiritual level, that is just existentially terrifying. I can't believe that this is even an issue at this point. I have friends that are Iranian, that I've met in the last little while, or Persian, I guess they call themselves. And they say, yeah, no, my whole family's there right now. And they're taking cover or whatever. And, I'm sorry, when has this ever been okay to engage in? I just, it seems like a no-brainer. Yeah.
I want to shed light on what I view as the most dangerous element of all of this. And it is the ideologies, because I'll make a call here. Anybody that believes that they don't have an ideology is blind, because if you think you don't have an ideology, that's an ideology. There's no escape from ideology, but there is a conscious and aware presence for us to develop that idea, right? And we have to really work hard to figure out what the truth, so our ideology is not way far off. And the ideology of self-interest is embedded in empirical sense. And I see it all around me. I see it in people that we try to, it's as simple as that. If people think about their self-interest first, then they're always looking for where the money exists and where the power exists. And there is no true stance for conscious awareness there, period. And this is something we figured out long time ago in the Middle East. That's why you have the ideas of selflessness, and because people are trying to be happier, so they talk about self-love. But the truth is that selflessness is the happiest moment, because you're thinking beyond yourself and you're seeing with more clarity, and possibly you can be of more service and have more purposeful life, right? Like we talked earlier about how happy it made you to be a part of the Peace Council, and it's quite a selfless endeavor. There's not it's not a place that keeps giving you Kinder eggs per se, right?
Yes, not at all. Yeah,
it's the other way around.
Yeah,
and so self-interest as a society is a total failure of the human being, and I want to point that out, because that's something, a reflection for Canada. I hope more people listen to that reflection. But if we look at now from a perspective of empire that's constantly waging war, it's rooted in self-interest, because it's rooted in justification of dominance, because dominance is acceptable to empire, to supremacy, because it is more resources, it is more this. It doesn't see per se the atrocities that it's committing or the impact that it's having on the world. And at its best, because we try to believe that we came from a international law kind of environment, which we can argue it could have, if maybe it was always empire, but with a little, cherry chocolate flavoring on top, right? Or something like that. But they're justifying it from the perspective of self-interest. And the ideology trickles down throughout the nations in self-interest. So now we understand why in industries, music industry, if you're in food industry, people expect you to follow suit and just worry about yourself, And you can't do nothing. So just worry about yourself, right? Self-interest across the board, empirical self-interest. Then we are all aligned with this higher class imperial lifestyle where, we could ask only for material gain in this world. But I'll stop here with the idea that it is a gamble at best. It is a gamble at best. No one knows how sure this gamble is going to unfold.
Yeah, that resonates with me on a number of fronts. But I guess the first thing I wrote down was there's obviously I would say a pretty robust Indigenous movement in Canada, in the First Nations here, and the folks that have had their lands exploited, endlessly. There's been some talk about the land back movement, and I think white settlers get afraid of it, because they go, oh, this is going to be, this kind of violent thing or anything, and it's going to get all, we're going to get dispossessed and, have shitty drinking water and whatever. And it's not actually, going to be this sort of violent dispossession. There's the reality that I think it's still a mindset of kind of white settlers or capitalists or whatever you want to refer to it as, that the only way that we can have this relationship is through violence. And it's, it's not really the case, and it's a way of thinking. Certainly capitalism, but also liberalism and the idea of the individual. I think people have gotten kind of siloed in terms of well, what about me kind of thing, and what about, me as an individual and doing these things and so on. And while that is enriching and can provide some benefits, at the end of the day, if we hope to reflect on these things as humans and as a collective, we need to do some unlearning for that. And I said before, but Eastern philosophy, and specifically Buddhism and some of Taoism, has been a big part of my therapy in terms of understanding this relationship as a collective, and certainly doing Communist Party work and things as well. Is you start to recognize it doesn't, I guess the way our liberal society is structured, certainly in Canada, it doesn't provide the full context to the suffering that people are enduring. It's, this person's homeless. It's not, this person is homeless and they've been struggling with addiction, and their parents left them on the street, and so on and so forth. They're kind of, it doesn't provide enough context, and we just get so siloed. I got a car when I was 30 years old for the first time, my first car. Up until that point, I was walking everywhere, and I felt so in touch with the community and everything, and being out kind of in public and meeting people. And then you get in a car, and then suddenly everything is, you become like a silo just on its own kind of thing. And you're not around people, you're not talking, you're not doing anything. And it's almost like it's this sort of siloing that's just kind of scaled up and up and up and up and up. Mm-hmm. And I guess the last thing I wanted to mention was something that really helped me to understand, I guess empire, so to speak, and specifically imperialism. This is a concept that's been treated in abstract by a lot of people. But there is a definition of imperialism, and the most appealing one for me is the one put forth by Lenin, which is that it's the highest stage of capitalism, in which it needs to kind of go abroad and start to exploit places, in a bit more detail. But it can be within a country as well as outside of the country. But
There is you bring great points, by the way, and I'll share with you some things. And it's funny, we threw some people hear the word communism, it's like, hey man, like in the base deal, it's funny because the way I think, many people are in a socialist mindset, not because of anything, just because you can feed a village with a fish. Hello, Jesus Christ, right? But the truth of the matter is how can I say it? It's like when people hear this word, they just shut off completely. It's like, all I'm saying is, even when I go around, people say, hey, comrade. I say, hey, I'm not your comrade, man. Like, listen, we must put definition on a base level of humanity first, because I feel like we're losing that beyond any other ideologies at this point. And then communism, I mean, at best, it's a part of history we should learn about, and we should learn the lessons that came from it, right? And what people need to realize is ideologies grow a reality and materialize in people, and then that becomes the effects that we see in nation or how it grows, empire, etc. But liberalism is an interesting one, because liberalism talks about the liberty of the human being. So in essence, that is self-determination. But the problem with liberalism is that it lacks any definition on how we're going to achieve that. In a modern sense, it's telling everybody that the only way to achieve that is just focus within, meaning that, you know what, I'm just going to be some sort of an egg that is cooking internally forever. When do we cross that boundary? When there is a promise of spiritual completion, right? That by doing that work, eventually I magically appear to be somewhere of a greater form of a human being than I was initially born. This is dangerous, because from a perspective of people who are dying in the Middle East, we must learn. And we learn that there are certain ideologies in the ruling class that looks at humanity from a perspective of engineering. So the human being is not the born, but rather the engineered human being, And so what we got to realize is that there's a form of engineering of what you're expecting us to be. You're expecting us to be the engineered being, right? Versus who we were born as a human being. If I want to adopt any ideology in the world, I'd rather learn about my existence as a human being, as a living being, from my inception, which begins with my total ignorance, and appreciate knowledge and learn and become more with knowledge, etc. Right? And the engineered being is somewhat trying to also say the same thing. However, it is saying it silently because it masquerades itself behind promises of spirituality with total lack of spiritual definition. And so in that ambiguous part of knowledge, because now we're not learning how to truly be sovereign and self-determination, but we're trying to be something that is imposed on you in so many levels, in culture, in music, in thoughts, and people around you. Without that piece of knowledge, enters a place of supremacy. And when we talk about sovereignty, self-determination, we have to be very careful to give that awareness and consciousness rooted in life, not in a living thing, not rooted in a place of authority that is coming through empire or somewhere else. Like, these are deep conversations, and maybe people won't really understand for the first. Maybe they do. I hope they do. I always will cheer for the for resonance of truth and the ability of the human being to understand. But I think I have seen enough people in my life, close and far, that they have gone astray with their ideology to the point where they have lost their ability to understand. There's only triggering, because everybody wants to justify their existence, and if they've chosen choices that took them astray, if you're trying to say that, hey, we need to discuss, somehow it's threatening their existence, and then they get triggered and no one is able to have a discussion. It's a sad reality, man. And in that is what I call intellectual slavery. is once we lose that, I believe that we are effectively a form of a slave, right?
Yeah, I read a book a long time ago that I think is just on the cusp of my intellectual understanding. I don't totally get it, but it was called Anti-Oedipus by Jean Deleuze and Felix Guattari. But the whole argument of the book was that modern psychoanalysis has actually been a way to sort of condition people into thinking a certain way and kind of craving an oppressor and so on and so forth. I wrote this phrase down that reminded me of something you had said earlier. I use it to remind myself sometimes, just if I ever had a bad day or something. But the stressed worker or the tired worker or the ignorant worker is the exploitable one. And I think it's very convenient for folks. They want to keep us in this kind of, it's almost like being in a vice or like an animal caught in a trap or something. And it requires you, I think, to, think about the collective a little bit. But this stuff is, I'll be one of the first people to say it. It's profoundly taxing, I think, emotionally and intellectually and everything to be able to resist, to try to resist these kinds of things. But I think in doing so, you're getting in touch with the collective and sort of where everybody is at mentally.
That is true, which is hilarious, because when I first came here, liberals would have no problem by metaphorically slapping me on the face if I spoke about collective. But, because individualism was such a big thing. And I'm saying the same thing. Hey, man, individualism is such a big thing because this ideology has created a tribe, and it has become a problem that we must discuss. And that doesn't say that liberalism didn't have its place in history in comparison to, let's say, the atrocities of the church and etc. Right? Yeah, but it had its place in history. It cannot replace spirituality. It cannot replace, I have that problem in the music industry, John. I'm expected all the time to fit a certain mold. And I refuse, because it's a part of my artistic human essence is for me to tell you, whoever you are, that I'm a human being. See me. And I expect you to also act from the same angle, because when you stand for yourself as a human being and demand to be seen as a human being, first and foremost, then we're going to arrive all to the place that we need to arrive to, right? But if you're telling me that everything I do, everything in my existence, simply because I am born in Syria, I'm born in the Middle East, I'm born in Kuwait, actually, but I come from Syrian parents, and I experienced Syria and the wars of the Middle East and the mutilation and imperialism and all of these things. And these things must be clarified. I cannot, otherwise they will, it's trauma, man. And I'm sharing with you via knowledge, via real work, and with a message of humanity and hope for peace, your peace, because and it's like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So if that's not enough, what is enough? For me to act a certain way, would that make you happy? Like, it's funny because my most famous post on social media was me chewing a bubble gum and blowing a bubble. Like, I did that, and all of a sudden it just fired up. It went viral, man. I'm like, holy crap. But that's a good place to wonder. Are these ideologies coming from people and the truth of what Canada was prior to, per se, social media and the social engineering that is happening to people through it without people's realization?
I think so. I think nationalism is a powerful thing, and there's I think for a lot of people, probably the older generations, there's a nostalgia to have things kind of go back to where they were, and I think in some respects we've hit a point of no return, especially with stuff like AI and conditions of living and so on. With that, and I think that there are elements of Canadianness. I went to school in Nova Scotia, and I went to school with the kids and people that were on kind of big TV shows on CBC and that kind of thing, to go kind of, that's great. I will say this though, certainly after looking at the 4,000 Tim Hortons commercial or anything, that we are being sold a little bit an idea of what it means to be a Canadian. And while some of it is good, I think it would be better to understand that on our own terms rather than have it be associated with double doubles or hockey or anything like that. While those things are enjoyable, don't let a bloody corporation tell you, who you think you should be it nationally or not. And I think we internalize that stuff a lot. It's advertising everywhere. I will look at the TV, I'll be playing a video game, I'll look down at my phone, there's an advertisement, I look back up at the TV, there's another advertisement kind of thing. So over a long enough period of time, we will internalize that stuff. I absolutely think. And go from there. It's tough. I think we can still appreciate where we are and what we've been given in this country and everything, but also demand better and also be a little bit critical of the country itself in terms of what we've seen and where it's gone and so on. And going back to what I said before, it should be guided by a feeling of love, I think. I've had to check myself with my own ideology. There's times where I've thought, maybe some, let's call it what it is, more violent prescriptions for, no, I think we should do this. Or, well, hold on, John, that's maybe not the way to do it kind of thing. That's your own anger getting in there. So I think more people in offices in office need therapy, among other things.
It's about knowledge and it's about choices, right? So even you mentioned the land back movement. There is a big portion, maybe there are ill players in there, but the truth of the matter is I've met enough sound First Nation people to realize that these people do see me as a human being, most likely more than most, because as a nation and as individuals, they have suffered and they've come so long in their organization that they have been educated about colonization and imperialism, and not only at a level of organization, what's happening on the land around, but also from a spiritual perspective of like the human being. So they've helped me personally to overcome some form of this imposition that I feel that I really quite frankly dislike. So then it's because of these people, not because of the term land back. Land back is a term and it's a slogan and it's a package or whatever. It's a logo, but it's because of the people who will choose to see the settler as a human being, and there is a point where settler and indigenous meet. So the definition of indigenous also is embodied in old settlers within Canada, because it has to be the people who have lived here. And the story is just got to be truthful by recognizing the roots of the Canadian society, which is these people. And I believe that at the essence, that's all they're asking for, is to be able to have a say in their own country, in their own land, especially when their water is being polluted and that is a mission I believe we all have to honor. And I'm thankful to the wise people who know the truth, because I am a settler in Canada. I truly appreciate when I see that kind of humanity coming through, and it does scare me when I don't see it, because social media sometimes creates those feelings amongst individuals who are on the phone, rather than like per se the people who began the movement as a form of allowing the First Nations to be heard for once in our history, at least their culture and story. But it's a funky thing that what you said to me is that you have to keep yourself in check in terms of the ideology that you create, and I think that we have to pay respect to knowledge and humanity, because this has been a wonderful conversation with you, John, and we don't have to know each other for long, and we don't have to grow up in the same place or anything, but we can have a conversation. And we can learn, and we can choose to learn from each other, and we can choose to be honest with each other. Really, that's all it takes. And the message for the supremacists, whether it's imperialism or any other reason, is that they need to understand that when they talk badly about the violence, most likely, and most of the time, the violence is created because of a certain ideology to keep people ignorant. Because of ignorance, we are losing people to all sorts of radicalizations. And music industry, you can go deep into what that looks like, but it is a form of radicalization. If you're truly just going to put your trust in industry, then you have learned nothing from history. They're asking you to be radicalized to be used in a certain container. So it's ignorance that's a problem. So by having this conversation, we're just saying that let's let knowledge prevail, understanding prevail, and if there's something that we are hiding, that is a problem, and we need to find ways to bring it from the shadows into the light, so we collectively can figure it out. Because if that's not the case, then what's the case? What's next?
Yeah.
We're gonna see robots going around here telling you, shut up. Like,
Yeah.
it's a sad reality. So that's my reflection on all of that, brother. Is there any in particular subjects that you'd like to branch into, John? Art-wise, responsibility of the human being, artist, anything at all that you had in mind, please go ahead and share.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was, you had sent me some questions when we got all this started about kind of the artist's duty to civic life and humanity as a whole, and it being a catalyst for human sovereignty. My girlfriend is a painter and has been one for most of her life so far. Has won lots of awards.
What? Sorry,
she's a painter.
What is that?
No, she paints pictures.
Oh, she's a painter. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah. But she's she did an indigenous dancer that is on display in Sir John A. Macdonald's house. So it's I think the role of an artist is to, I think in some ways, mirror civic life and humanity as a whole. And I think it's about that relationship between the two that real insight can be gained. Something I wrote down in here is trying to appeal to collective humanity. I think an effective way to do that is to indicate when there's a lack of it. I think that that's something that artists are exceptionally good at. You can sense the sarcasm sometimes coming through, a canvas or even a song or anything. I really like hip hop. I've since quite young kind of thing, and there's this is kind of bubbling up to the surface a little bit, and it's portrayed in different ways. There's one guy I really like. His name is Vin. He's from the U.S. I want to say Atlanta, and he has a song where he will kind of go into it, and he's talking about the gangster life or anything, but just the tone of voice and the way that he's delivering it it's actually quite sarcastic. With like, there's not a lot of humanity here, kind of thing. And I'm going to show you that this is how you sound when you say this is what you want to do, kind of thing. So this is a topic I very much enjoy because my girlfriend, she'll hear me talk about these kinds of things, and she's like, okay, but I'm a painter, John. Like, I don't have much of a relationship with this. No, you absolutely do. It's there is a role for you to play in this. I think it's essential and should not be discounted or anything. And I guess something I said a little while ago. I'm helping to do a display for Hiroshima Day later next week at a local business. So in the front window, we're going to put this stuff together. And I said to a few of my friends, the right doesn't get a monopoly on aesthetics. Kind of things looking cool and fascism and everybody's in black leather and stuff. No. We can apply this stuff in kind of a more universal and maybe even a left way to kind of have these relationships with humanity and compassion and human sovereignty and things. We can let the art speak to that. I think that's 100% doable, and that's I'm really hoping to do that. So.
Hey man, congratulations on that. It's interesting, when you're saying let the art speak for that. I have a little hard feelings with let's say the copyright industry and the control that is coming from top-down approach, because that's what that is. It's another form of imperialism and hierarchy and somebody making decisions for everybody, right? Like, for example, with BeatsUnion, I have artists who signed to be a part of BeatsUnion and give me the rights for me to promote their music as a form and a catalyst to promote the platform. But when we post that, then we get a right away, and even in social media, like copyright protected data. Yeah, but I'm talking to the artist. I have made a conversation and a deal and even a signed contract with the artist to say that I can do this, right? So I hope that people who believe just blindly copyright sync, that there is an element of imposition that is coming through that. The solution is not that for arts. Because in a way, we're losing the human element and we're taking away the ability of people to organize, which, by the way, comes from the underground. And so, there's room here to speak about piracy and the nature of piracy and, and the sublime aspiration for the arts. Would we like artists who cannot afford anything to be able to at least find a way to become an artist, or would we rather them to join a violent militia of who God knows what ideology? And I think that in the ghetto and rap and hip hop, that is really the goal of hip hop at a core essence, because they're revolutionaries. They're trying to save the human being and get them out of poverty and its thoughts of darkness. It's definitely a mission to speak about the place of the artist and humanity, because without that, see you later. We cannot we cannot just make art just for money and for sustainability and when you succeed you can make a statement. Are you kidding me? It's a part of it's the part of the entire process. What if I never make it? I live and die in silence. So there's an element to some of those things that you're talking about in the industry today that we face.
I think so.
Okay, so I think how long have we been? Did you know? I don't even know when I pressed the button to start recording.
For now, I'd say about 55 minutes or so.
Okay, so we can head to possibly wrap it up, because I can talk to you. Sure. I can talk to you forever, John, and we should do more and more work, man. It's been a true honor to meet and talk with you and discuss things with you. I want to make a call out here through this podcast, and please do spread it through your channels. Is the element that you mentioned? There's Canadian folklore, there's Canadian folklore music, and there's Canadian folklore dance that bridges also indigenous and settlers, and you can see those things mixed up together through the art, and it was such a beautiful scene. There's a certain misconception for people that come into Canada that they be like, whoa, what is this place? People are so shallow, like all their culture is double at Tim Hortons. That's bogus, because there has been amazing culture in Canada, and I feel like the subject of self-determination is at the heart of everybody's struggle. So if there's anything that we can do to help and support in the preservation and the amplification of that Canadian essence, BeatsUnion will gladly set itself under the feet of the artist. And that is really, truly the essence of the work and why we have built what we have built with BeatsUnion. By the way, with the support of the Canadian Council for the Arts, in respect to the idea of the sublime importance of Canadian institutions, right? So it's a double whammy. We can succeed on multiple levels and multiple layers, and we can give them also a truly impactful and successful story, which I'm sure all our institutions will appreciate today, because they're also under scrutiny, right? Okay, my man. Anything else before we wrap this up, John?
Well, I guess the last thing, www.canadianpeacecongress.ca is the website, and Kingston Peace Council out of Kingston, Ontario, we have an Instagram account and a Facebook one. Our email is info.kingstonpeacecouncil@gmail.com. Any inquiries can be forwarded through social media or over email. It doesn't matter. I personally handle all three of them, so
Perfect. And I will add those links in the description. Please, everyone, follow. A part of In Pursuit of Peace is to bridge that connection between the artists, humanity, through the peace councils and selfless, amazing people such as John, who, quite frankly, have chosen a very bumpy road, but chose it carefully, and may it be a life full of purpose, and may it be an impactful one, Brother John in Kingston, Ontario.
Yes, and to you as well, Noor. Thanks so much for having me today for this conversation. It was enriching.
Thank you so much, John. Let's do more. And if you have any ideas, this is an open door for anybody who would like to, I don't want to say, anybody that wants to take advantage of the opportunities that hopefully we can develop with BeatsUnion as well to amplify such amazing and wonderful messages. Have an amazing day.
Yes, you as well.